welcome back and happy Valentine's Day! If you couldn't guess, Valentine's Day is one of my favorite holidays. I just love the aesthetic, the pink, the red, the hearts, the candy, the chocolate, everything. I especially love vintage 1950s and Victorian Valentine's aesthetic. Those are my favorites. A few years ago, the internet created the term lovecore, and I use that to describe my fashion. I just think it really fits me because everything I do is created around like the Valentine's aesthetic. I also like the freedom of not having to fit into a specific style like goth fashion or Lolita fashion. Those tend to have more specific rules. And lovecore, you can kind of dress however you want as long as it fits into like pink and red and kind of vaguely Valentine's inspired with like hearts and lace and ribbons and chocolate and details like that. So because I love the Valentine's aesthetic so much, I decided a few years ago to start making a dress every year for Valentine's Day. So of course I'm making one this year, but I also want to show you the ones that I made in the past few years. So the first one I made was in 2019, and here it is. The middle front of the bodice has completely hand-sewn details, and this is still one of my favorite dresses that I've ever made. It has a lot of really nice lace and these little heart details, and I just love everything about this dress. The fit is really cute, and the one that I'm doing this year is going to be slightly inspired by this one, but we'll talk about that later. And then the next one I made was in 2020, and it is this one. So this one is completely made out of silk that I got at the fabric market that I usually go to. And I was so excited when I found the fabric. It's a very rare and special find. And the fabric is really beautiful. I absolutely love it. And it's actually a dress and jacket set. It took me a few tries to make this jacket design, and I'm really happy with how it came out. I've been meaning to make more jackets like this, but I just haven't done it yet. The jacket closes in the front with some snaps, and instead of eyes for the hooks, I used an embroidery thread just to make the thing for it to hook onto. And the top of the dress also closes like this, and I did these little heart details on the front. And yeah, this is also one of my favorite dresses. I absolutely love how it came out. I'm really proud of it. And I love wearing the pieces together and separate. And then the next dress I made in 2021 was this red silk robe de style 1920s inspired dress. So I love the 1920s, and I really love these style of dress, the robe de style, which I know I'm pronouncing wrong. But I love these because they're very 18th century inspired. And they're the specific style of dress because of the panniers that hold the skirt out at the side. And I really love this dress. I think it's really pretty and fancy, but it's definitely less popular than my other dresses. And then in 2022 is when I started the dress that I'm going to be finishing in this video. But I also made this red and pink hoodie dress, and I also made a couple of hoodies to sell as well. But yeah, I really like how this red hoodie dress came out. It's super comfy and warm, but it's not as fancy as my other Valentine's dresses. And then last year in 2023, I made these hoodies for myself and my friend, and I also advertised this style and sold a few of these hoodies on my store as well. So I didn't get a chance to finish up that dress again last year. So this year I'm finally finishing this dress that I started in 2022. And this dress is also made of the same silk that I used for my dress in 2020. But I bought it at a separate time. I went back to the fabric market months later, and he had the pink silk fabric again. So of course I had to get more. I couldn't say no. It was only like 10 euros a meter, and for silk, that's an amazing price. And I also had the red silk left over from my dress that I made in 2021, the 1920s inspired one. Oh, I also made a purse for this dress as well. So the dress I'm finishing this year is inspired by the first dress I made because I want to do like a Rococo style with hand-sewn details on the front of the bodice, just like I did with the first dress. So yeah, without further ado, let's get started. I'm so excited to finish up this dress. First, let's start with the sketches that I made. So here's the sketch I originally made, but I wanted to redo it and update it a bit. And here's my new sketch. Yeah, it's not great, but it's the best I can do. So I originally started this dress with no intention of making it into a full video, which means that these beginning clips are in vertical mode, so we're gonna go through them as quickly as possible. I didn't film cutting everything out, so we're starting on the bodice right away. I used the pattern I made for my Rococo set. I wanted to start on the bodice details first, so I assembled the front of the bodice. I used interfacing to reinforce the middle part of the bodice, where I will be putting all the appliques. I figured out the design I wanted by sketching it with a disappearing ink marker. I want to do a bow applique at the top, with strips of the pink silk and 3 red hearts down the middle. I used some scraps left over from the red silk from my 1920s dress to make some red hearts for the front. I figured out the size of hearts I wanted and cut them out a little bigger so I could iron interfacing to them. I ironed the interfacing to the hearts and cut off the excess. I wanted them to be a little puffy and 3D on the dress, so I used a little batting on the inside of the hearts. I just pinned the batting and hearts to the bodice and then sewed a zigzag stitch around the edges of the hearts. Once the hearts were sewn on, I took the strips of pink fabric that I previously ironed on and pinned them onto the bodice in a design that I liked. Once they were in a design that looked good, it was time to start sewing. I hand sewed the strips all around the edges onto the bodice. This took a really long time, and it's pretty difficult to film something like this. So I have a bunch of footage of me slowly hand sewing the bow on. There isn't really a trick to this, it's pretty easy. I just put small stitches along the top edges of the strips and sewed them onto the bodice. I didn't time how long this took, but it took a really long time, and it's one of the reasons why I stopped working on this dress for a while. I was kind of afraid to finish this dress because I didn't want to mess up the rest of the dress after spending so long working on the bodice. I also kind of got stuck because I wasn't sure how I wanted to finish the rest of the details on the bodice, so I switched to working on the skirt instead. I started by sewing some lace along the hem. Now I wanted to do red hearts all along the bottom edge, so I had to figure out how to do that. I did some testing with some applique techniques, and I decided that I like how this looks, this one. So I added interfacing to the silk, and I also added interfacing to the red silk. So I already ironed some interfacing onto this scrap of red silk, and I outlined a bunch of little hearts. Here's my pattern, and I'm going to cut these out, and then I'm going to add interfacing onto the dress just like this. And I will be sewing all the little red hearts along the hem. So I cut out all the little hearts and figured out where to put them on the dress by measuring. Also, apparently I didn't film any of the sewing on process for these hearts, but I just zigzag stitched around them like I did with the bodice hearts. I also ironed squares of interfacing to the inside of the dress so the zigzag stitching would be smooth. And now we are back at present time to finally finish the dress. So I've had this dress sitting around for like a year since the last time I worked on it, but I started like 2 years ago, I think. So I have the top, front, and the skirt finished. I've got a ruffle to go on the skirt. I've got the lining, except for the back panel for shirring, which I have cut out of silk, but I don't have out of the lining. I only have one side panel from the silk, so I need to cut out another one. I don't know what happened to the other one. I've got sleeve straps cut out already, and I've got a ruffle for the front of the top cut out already. And these are left over from this dress that I made a couple years ago for Valentine's Day, and they're like some scraps, so I'm going to make a bow with that. Alright, back into it. First I made sure I had all the pieces I needed for the bodice. I cut out what I needed, then I sewed the right back side panel onto the right side of the bodice. The other side is going to have a zipper so it doesn't get sewn together yet. I also sewed the lining and outer layer of the back middle panel, which is going to be for making a shirring panel, which is just fabric sewn with channels for elastic to go through, so the back of the dress can be stretchy. Now before I finish the bodice, I want to finish the skirt. Oh, you can see the squares of interfacing on the inside of the skirt here. Anyway, so to finish the skirt, I made some long rectangles, 1.5 times the width of the skirt, and hemmed the bottom edge and added a gathering stitch to the top so I could gather the ruffle down onto the skirt edge. I was originally not going to have a ruffle and have a red skirt layer underneath peeking out, but I didn't like how it looked, so I decided to do this instead. Okay, so I went out and got a zipper. I forgot to film because it was really busy, but yeah, I got a zipper, and I also got some more trim. I think I want to do a ruffle in this pink fabric along here, and then do the trim in the middle of the ruffle. So I'll need to cut out some more fabric to make the little ruffle, but I really want to work on the top next and try and get as much of the top done as possible. So what I want to do with the zipper is sew it like halfway on, because the zipper is longer than the top. So I'll need to halfway attach the zipper so that I can do the top and the back panel and add the ruffles onto the front of this piece before I add the skirt, and then sew the rest of the zipper on. So it's going to be a little bit tricky, a little bit complicated, but it'll make sense as I'm doing it, hopefully. So I couldn't find an invisible zipper in light pink, so I got a normal zipper this time. I sandwiched each side of the zipper in between the lining and outer layers and pinned them together to keep everything in place. Then I sewed it together and I left the bottom unsewn so I could add the skirt later. I also sewed the top edge of the bodice to combine the outer and lining layers. And then I flipped the bodice inside out. I ironed the top seam so it would lay flat and the lining wouldn't show. I also ironed the sides with the zipper. Then I continued adding details to the stomacher section. I pinned some gathered lace onto the sides to frame the center. I sewed it on, making sure I only sewed it onto the outer layer. Next, I switched to working on the elastic back panel piece, the shirring panel. Before the panel gets sewn onto the dress, I draw lines onto the lining that I'll be sewing over later to make the channels for the elastic to go through. I used a disappearing ink marker initially, but I had to go over the lines with tailor's chalk later because the lines disappeared too quickly. The chalk stays on a lot better, which is also why I don't usually use it. It can be difficult to remove. But yeah, I needed to use it this time. I really wanted to get the bodice done, so I pinned the back panel onto the back side pieces so I could sew them together. I left the lining pieces loose for now so I could add the elastic later. There are a lot of different ways to add shirring to something, and I just have my own weird method of doing it. Before I finish the back panel, I want to work on the details again. I made some ruffles with long rectangles of silk that I hemmed on both sides and sewed a gathering stitch down the middle on. I want to sew the ruffles framing the center first. I again made sure to sew the ruffles only on the outer layer. I also left the ends loose for now because I'm either going to add them onto the straps or along the top edge. To sew the ruffles along the top, I need to finish the back first. With the ruffles sewn on, I needed to finally finish adding the little details to the centerpiece. I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted, so I laid everything out to test the design. I used some little white and pink ribbon roses that I got from the fabric store, some pink hearts that used to be trim, and I just cut the hearts apart so they would be just individual pieces. I also had some of the sequin trim left from this dress that I made for New Year's one year. It adds a nice bit of sparkle and fills in the space nicely. Once I liked how it looked together, I started sewing it all on. I'm just simply sewing the little details on with a few stitches, so they're not super secure, but I won't be wearing this dress very often. I actually can't even wash it really. I'm afraid the red silk will probably bleed the dye onto the rest of the dress if I get it wet, so this is really for special occasions only. This took a while, but it was pretty easy and I kinda like hand sewing. I'm not sure how long I spent in total hand sewing the stomacher, but I think it was probably around 4 to 6 hours. After I finished hand sewing the details, I could finally assemble the dress properly. But before we continue, let's have a little cat break. This is Topaz. You might have seen her already in my videos. She's so cute and silly. She sneaks into my room to see what I'm doing, and she found the fabric laying out, and she really likes it for some reason. The silk must smell interesting to her. Oh, I wanted to show something about silk fabric that makes it tricky to work with and that I didn't know the first time I worked with it. All fabric is woven and has a warp and weft. I'm not an expert at this, so I'll do my best to explain. With some fabric, it doesn't matter as much which way to use it, but with taffetas, organzas, and similar fabrics that are like a little bit more stiff, it's really important. The fabric will only gather properly if it's cut out right. You can see when I bunch the fabric, it's easier to gather up when I go one way, and it's much bulkier the other way. So when I cut out ruffles, I have to make sure the fabric is going the correct way. If you ever have trouble gathering fabric, this might be one of the reasons. Anyway, I cut out some strips of fabric to be little ruffles for the skirt. I double fold and sew each side to hem them like I did with the bodice ruffles. And then I sewed a gathering stitch down the middle. I gathered and pinned the ruffles onto the skirt. I tried the dress on once the ruffles were sewn on, but I felt like the skirt was a few inches too long, so I measured and marked at the top of the skirt how much I wanted to cut off. I cut each layer separately so they would be even. Afterwards, I gathered the skirt onto the top so I could test it out again. I definitely think it's better shorter, but can you tell the difference? I think it's easier to see in person. Once I liked the length, I started hand sewing the rose trim onto the middle of the skirt ruffle. Okay, so I'm almost done with the dress and we're going to the pink castle in just a couple days. So I want to get all of the dress done today, or at least have it completely assembled and maybe do a little bit of touch-ups, details after it's all assembled. I added a bunch of little sequins onto the top, so I really want to incorporate sequins on the skirt somehow. I'm not sure exactly what I want to do. I think I want to add some sequins along here somehow. But yeah, I really need to get everything like assembled before I do the sequin details. So we're gonna do all that next. So it's on to assembling everything together. Oh, my sister sent me this robe for Christmas and I just wanted to show it off a bit because it's so fancy and I love it. So once I liked the length of the skirt, I could then sew it onto the bodice. I gathered, pinned, and sewed it on mostly normally, but for the pointed middle part of the bodice, I do it a little bit differently. I fold over the seam allowance on the pointed bit and then pin it to keep it folded. I pin the excess fabric from the skirt up around where the rest of the waistband is. Then I just hand sew the skirt onto the bodice. I do it this way so I don't have to cut out the skirt at the top beforehand. Also, if I just left the skirt straight and sewed it along the pointed bottom, then the front of the skirt would be longer than the rest of it. Now that the skirt is sewn on, I can finish the back panel. I start by pinning down the middle section, then I fold and pin the bottom edge up. Now I just sew over the lines that I marked before. With the panel sewn down, I could now add the elastic. I use a fabric turning tool to thread the elastic through. It's got a little hook at the end, so I hook the elastic onto it. I cut the ends of the elastic to the length of the panel for now. I want to secure one side of the elastic, so I fold the side panel over the edge of the middle panel and pin it in place. I sew down the side panel to secure it and the elastic. I make sure to backstitch over every piece of elastic because I don't want them to break or become unsewn. One side of the elastic is secured, so now I can pull the other end of the elastic to gather the fabric. Then I pinned the elastic in place so I could try on the dress. It's fitting a little weird and a little loose, but I figured it just needed the elastic tightened a bit. So I tightened it and then folded over the side panel like I did before so I could sew it down and secure the elastic. I also finished up sewing the zipper on and doing a top stitch to keep the fabric in place covering the zipper. Now I just need to sew the lining down along the bottom edge. At the front with the pointed bodice section, I pinned up the seam allowance on the lining so I could just top stitch it down. Now the dress is almost done, so I tested out some bows and tried out the sequin idea I had, but I didn't really like it, so I just decided to scrap it. I think it looks good with just the hearts along the edge. So then I tried it on again, but unfortunately I still wasn't liking how it was fitting. The elastic panel is gathered up too small, so that means the side panels are too wide and not fitted properly. So at this point, I've got almost all of the dress done, but I really don't like how it's fitting. So I think I'm going to have to completely take out the back panel and the zipper, or at least mostly take out the back panel and the zipper and redo it a little bit because I spent so much time making the details on the front of the dress and on the skirt that it's really worth it for me to take the time to take it apart and redo it so it fits right the first time so I don't have to go redo it later. And if I don't make it fit right, then I'm not going to want to wear it. So I'm going to take it apart and redo it even though I really don't want to. Yeah, so I spent a while just ripping out all the stitching I showed you that I just did. It's so annoying and I kind of thought this would happen. I hate seam ripping, but it's worth doing so I can fix my project and make it fit right. Next I loosened the elastic using the extra I left in there and pinned it to keep it in place. I had to completely separate the front and back of the bodice. I also took the skirt off the side panels. It all needed to come off so that I would be able to cut off about an inch on all the side pieces. Once the side panels were trimmed, I could start reassembling the bodice. Okay, so I fixed the fit on the rest of the dress, and I just have to sew up the elastic again, the short panel in the back. But I've tried it on a couple times, and now it's a little too tight, which is really frustrating, really annoying. So what I think I'm going to have to do is open up the other side of the shirt panel here and add new elastic, because this elastic is a little too small. I need to add another like inch or so of elastic to make it fit better, because now it's too tight. Like, I can get it on and it feels pretty tight, but like it's really hard to zip up. And I think it would just be better if I went ahead and redid the elastic, which is really annoying, but I want the outfit to fit right, so I need to take the time to fix it and do it properly, because if I finish it and it's too tight, then I'm going to be really upset and I'm not going to be able to wear it. So I just have to take out the stitching on this side, and then take out all of the elastic, and then put in new pieces of elastic. That's right, we're doing this again. So I completely pulled out the elastic, and earlier when I cut off the extra elastic here, I had some pieces left over. I decided to use them to replace the old pieces because they were a few inches longer than the ones I took out. That way I wouldn't need to cut new pieces of elastic. Next, I pulled the new pieces through and pinned them in place. Okay, I think it's fitting a little bit better. It's not too tight now. It needs to be a little bit tighter at the waist, so I'll pull the elastic a little bit tighter at the bottom. But the rest of it is fitting pretty good. So I think I can sew the elastic back down, just do a little bit of adjustment, and then I can move on to finishing the rest up. Now I can finally finish with the elastic panel and sew it back up again the way I did it before. I love having these shirring panels in my dresses so they fit better and more comfortably, but they are very annoying to do. Anyway, we just have the sleeves and a few details to finish. We're almost done. I made some tubes of fabric for the sleeve straps and ironed them flat. Then I pinned them onto the dress and made sure they were the right length. I also tried out whether I wanted the ruffles to go over the straps or around the top of the bodice. I think both ways look cute, but I preferred the look of the ruffles on the bodice. What do you guys think? I pinned the ruffles across the top of the bodice and folded the ends under to finish them. On the side with the zipper, I just gathered the ruffle along the top, then smoothed out the gathering over the zipper section and cut apart the ruffle. Then I folded under the edges to finish. Then I sewed both ruffles into place. With the ruffles sewn down, I could hand sew the rose trim along the center. Now the dress is all assembled, and here's how it looks on the outside and on the inside. Before this dress is done, we have to add some bows, of course. I'll probably never make an outfit that doesn't have any bows. I just used some red ribbon and some ribbon roses that I had sitting around. I made the bows, and then I sewed the roses and the bows onto the dress. I also want to add some bows to the top of the sleeve straps. This will add a bit more red to the dress to balance it out. So I have these pieces of the red silk left with the lace on them still, and I was going to use this to make a hair bow, but I think it would be really cute if I make a really big bow to go at the back of the dress. So I think I'm just going to use these and add lace to the other side and finish this bottom edge, and just make a little waistband like this and have it button on. That way I can have the really big bow at the back, and I think that will be really cute. There's not enough fabric here to make it like actually tie on, so I think that doing a waistband like this will be a little bit better. So I think we're gonna do that next, and then everything will be done. So I really want to finish the dress, so we're speeding through making the bow and waist tie. I used the big pieces to make the bow, and I made a waistband with elastic in the middle, and it buttons onto the dress. And with that, the dress is completely done. Yay! Alright, it's time to go to the pink castle today. So I'm gonna do my makeup and do my hair and then get dressed. So I'm super excited and the dress came out really cute, so let's get ready. Now it's time to head to the pink castle. So we are going to Schloss Benrath in Dusseldorf, Germany. It's about a 2-hour drive from Amsterdam. They call it a castle, but it's more like a Baroque mansion. It's all pink on the outside and it's so beautiful. It was made by the Elector Palatine Charles Theodore and his wife Elizabeth August of Sulzbach. They began construction on the castle in 1755 and it was completed in 1770. There are 3 separate buildings. The 2 larger ones were for servants' quarters, and the main building at the center of both was the home of the Elector. This was also meant to be a secondary summer hunting lodge, so I'm not sure how much they actually lived here. The building is very well maintained and everything is in pristine condition. We walked around outside a bit, then went into the main building. The garden and park area outside is free, but you have to get a ticket to go inside. They also require you to wear slippers so you don't damage the wooden floors. The slippers were really big and awkward, but I managed to shuffle around okay. Oh my gosh, this place is so beautiful. There are these 2 pink and gold rooms at the back of the castle, and I wish I could have a house like these. My houses I make in The Sims do look like this. I wish they made communal housing that looks like Baroque mansions like this. I want to live in a cute, fancy mansion with a bunch of other people who like fancy decor like this. Plus, I'll never be rich enough to live like this, not that I would want to either, but they could just hire me to wear costumes, live here, and be decor, and I would be happy.
After we finished going through the castle, which was actually smaller than I was expecting, we went over to the gift store. I like to get a little trinket when I travel places as a memento, and I found a fan with datura flowers on it, so of course I had to get it. Afterwards, we headed back home. It was hard to leave. This place was so beautiful, and I'd really love to come back again. Anyway, here's my little trinkets that I got. They also had a coin press to make a little Benrath coin souvenir, so I got one. I'd love to make it into a bracelet. Also, here's the fan I got. It's pink, and it has datura flowers on it, so it was obviously meant to be.
And that was it. Thank you so much for joining me along this journey to make my Valentine's Day dress this year. I hope you enjoyed seeing my progress, and I'm pretty happy with how the dress came out. It's a little wide on the bodice, but I made that part before the rest of it, so it was kind of hard to judge exactly. And that's why I usually make like all the details and stuff afterwards, like after I finish the main basic structure and design. But it's definitely easier to hand sew all the little details on first before everything's finished. And I think the design looks really cute in the end anyways, so I'm very pleased with how it came out in the end. And I hope you like it as well. I'm really glad to be finally finished with it. It took me so long. I'm not sure it's as nice as I thought it would for how long it took, but I'm very happy with it in the end, and I'm glad to be finished with it, so next year I can start fresh and make a new Valentine's Day outfit. I had a really wonderful time at the castle. It was a little bit smaller than I was expecting, but it was still really beautiful, and I loved all the pink everywhere. People were really nice when I went there as well. I had a couple people ask questions, and I just talked to them for a little bit, and there were a ton of little girls that saw me and were just amazed. So that was really fun. I love dressing up and going out in public so that people can see me, and especially little kids. I hope to inspire them one day to be able to dress up like I do. I want to show people you can live your dreams and you can dress how you want and make yourself happy, and that there's nothing wrong with that. When I was younger, I had no idea I was going to be able to make clothes like this. When I started sewing, I was not that good. So to be able to make dresses like this now and to be able to go to like a castle like Benrath is like living my dreams. It really makes my inner child happy. It's something that I never thought I would be able to do. So when I make a dress like this, like I still surprise myself every time. And I really want to encourage you, if you love fashion, start sewing. Like, make your own accessories, just do something, get dressed up and go out. People are so much nicer than you think they are. Just dress up and have fun. Who cares if people don't like it? If you're making yourself happy, that's what really matters. I don't know, I'm just rambling. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you like how my dress came out, and I hope to see you in my next video. Thank you so much. Okay, bye!
Also, for my new Patreon tutorial about to go up is this face mask design I made, and I include the pattern in 2 sizes.
Only slightly ruined the walking in shot. Just drop it. Just drop this movie. So is that on? Okay.